What is up, everybody? Talking fantasy football, man. Fantasy football is here. This is going to be the first post of many when we're talking about fantasy football. This is something that I've been planning for an awful long time. Okay. This is the Fantasy Football Firebox podcast live show, right? We've been doing the Fantasy Firebox for a couple months now, previewing every single division in football. Break it into players, break it into offensive systems, the new coaches, the new acquisitions, and now we're ready to go full out DFS, full out streamline right here. Fox Sports The Gambler, Heat Ratio Sports, PhillyInfluence.com. We're joining them all up, bringing everybody in that talks of fantasy. So I want to know how everybody's draft right now. Before we even get in it, we're gonna get a lot into either ors. I have a lot of either ors voted for tonight. And we're going to go through every single either or, whether it be running back, whether it be quarterback, whether it be wide receiver. I want to know about the different drafts that you guys have done, players that you feel that have been falling so far, players that aren't getting any love, right? I want to hear about it all. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. But we're going to start right off the bat with, did your fantasy football league come back? And that's what I want to know. Did your fantasy football league come back? And if it did you guys change it in any way? Did you change the format because of maybe the injuries that are going to start to happen, week after week? Because of, in the one league that I'm in, we have 3 COVID IR spots, right? 3 COVID IR spots. That's something that's very interesting. And it's not for injuries. It's for COVID. You have to have COVID in order to be on the IR spot. I know a lot of people decided that they were not going to do it. A lot of people decided that they were going to just do straight DFS. That's they decided. And you know what? I could see that. I'll be honest with you. One of my big money leagues, they specifically said, you know what? Let's just do a DFS league this year. Let's just do a DFS because at least then we'll be able to consistently talk week in and week out. What's up, John? How you doing, buddy? Checking in twice in one day. John Crichton. What up? Last Out Media, always hanging. My man, appreciate the love as always. But here's the thing. This year being so interesting and so abbreviated when we talk about off season and talk about the COVID era, I really think that your best bet was to go to DFS this year and just streamline your picks week in and week out. I mean, because you just don't know who is going to be there. You really don't. I mean, that's the problem. You don't know from week to week who's going to be injured. You don't know from week to week who is going to be, healthy for that perspective, right? So, I mean, there's so many different scenarios. The one thing I like is the best ball draft. I think the best ball draft, what that does, it gives you the opportunity to not only get a hands-off approach to where you're drafting, right? You're sitting there, you're drafting your team, and then you set it and forget it. You hear that term all the time, right? Set it and forget it. It's one of the best terms you've ever heard. One of the best leagues for people that just want to exactly what you said. Set it and forget it, right? I mean, that's what you want to do. You want to get your lineup, whether you have 2 quarterbacks or you have 3 running backs. You have so many different positions, but you don't have to do anything else with them. Once you draft, that's it. You don't even have to look at your team, right? You don't even have to look at your team because basically what you're doing is you're drafting it and then you're forgetting about it. So that's one of the leagues that a lot of people start to go towards, and they gravitate towards that because, again, they don't have to worry about their lineup. So, it'll be interesting to see how many people went that route and how many people continue the standard league. I mean, the standard leagues are always great. I love the standard league, but this year I'm just very, very skeptical to see what's going to happen. I really am, because listen, you're already seeing it with the Philadelphia Eagles. You're already seeing injuries already mount. You were seeing it in the abbreviated training camp that they have. So this is something that's going to continue throughout the year. It's going to run its course through every NFL team. So I am very curious to hear what you guys have done. So as you guys are checking in, I got people texting me. This is the phone going crazy. I got to get a new phone, man. Y'all, I got to get a new phone. It's killing me. It's finally time for me to upgrade because His phone, I got an S8 and a Galaxy S8, and it's not cutting it anymore, man. It's not cutting it anymore. Listen, they got you. They got you. No matter what you do, once the phone starts to get old, it doesn't update, it freezes, it runs slow, and you have to get a new one. You think you're going to be no phone payment, you got to get under another contract again, man. So they got you. It's just like car insurance, man. It's something that you hate paying, but it's something that you need. I mean, your phone is a way of life. So, but no, DFS standard of best ball. So best ball, I can tell you what. 2 years ago was the first experience I had in a best ball draft, and it was great. It was absolutely great. I never knew about it. What we did was Mike Alexander from RotoWire decided that he was going to break divisions up into cheesesteak companies, right? Which was great. So I was representing Steve's Prince of Steaks. So for any of my Philly people watching, Steve's Prince of Steaks to me is my all-time favorite. And I represented them pretty well. And I honestly didn't know it was a best ball draft. I did the draft. And afterwards, I was like, wow, this is, I like my team. I'm liking the way it stacks up. And then what happened was I went to make a move. And when I went to make a move, it said no moves are available. And I was like, wait a minute. So I messaged the commission. I said, I can't make any moves. Is there a waiver process? What's going on? He goes, oh, no, this is best ball. I said, what's best ball? He's like, oh, you set it and forget it. And I was like, okay. So basically I make no moves all year. And he said, no. I was like, wow, this is fantastic. I literally looked at that lineup maybe 3 times throughout the entire year. And I wound up finishing second. And I didn't even know what the hell I was doing, which was crazy. So the second year when I went to best ball, I finished second again, but at least then I was able to, basically rate my players on a best ball system because, depending on what the system is, you could have a maximum of 3 quarterbacks on your team. Well, obviously you want all 3 quarterbacks on your team because they're going to score points all the time. There is no starting lineup. So 3 quarterbacks is 3 quarterback point systems. So definitely want to get them in there. So best ball for me is pretty neat. I enjoy it. I join at least 1 or 2 a year now because, again, like I said, it's a really good practice for a mock draft standpoint. It gets to give you an idea of where guys are going, but you have to take it with a grain of salt a little bit because they are drafting a different way with a different format. But at least it gives you an idea where these people are going. Now, when you talk about the standard league, if there's anybody out there who does not draft PPR, I would love to hear from you. I want to know what you're doing. I want to understand why you have not developed a PPR system, right? I really want. Oh, we got Bill's Mafia already checking in. Bill's Mafia. Okay, listen. Because we already have Bill's Mafia checking in, which, listen, I may have respect to Bill's Mafia because the way you guys tailgate is second to none. I got a question for you, Bill's Mafia, okay, because I was going to bring this up later. So we're going to go right with our either or right off the bat. And we're going to talk about Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, right? We're going to talk about Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs. Who is going to have the better year this year? Is it going to be Adam Thielen by himself or Stephon Diggs by himself? Now, I'm sure Mr. Bulls Mafia here is probably going to say Stephon Diggs. And you know what? I think this is a really close call because Adam Thielen always wanted to be the guy, getting paid like the guy. There was always that, wow, look at that. Look what my man Bill's Mafia, 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns. Listen, man. Listen, I will bet you a cheesesteak on that, my man. And I will send it to any address that you have. 12 touchdowns and 1,500 yards. This will go down. This will be on the Heat Ratio Sports YouTube page. You will be able to listen to it later. I guarantee you that. If he gives you 12 touchdowns and 1,500 yards, cheesesteak of your choice to your house, wherever you want. There you go. Cheese for wings. I'm in because I've never had a buffalo wing, right? Straight from Buffalo. So I've had buffalo wings, but never had the legit buffalo wings. But I will tell you this. I'm a big Stephon Diggs guy. I do like Stephon Diggs. I do like him going to Buffalo. I do. I think he's a very underrated receiver. And I actually think he's going to excel. Listen, I've said, if you listen to Fantasy Firebox podcast, when we previewed the AFC, I thought people said I was nuts when I said he could be a top 7 fantasy wide receiver this year. I really believe that if Josh Allen can stand correct back there in the pocket, if Josh Allen can be the quarterback we know that he can be with more training and more accuracy and more feel for the system. So I think Stephon Diggs is a really good player when you talk about fantasy football because I think he will excel in that Sean McDermott system. Now, I will say, though, Adam Thielen, I'm still going with Adam Thielen. And I'll tell you why. Because Kirk Cousins, all day long, Kirk Cousins is going to throw the ball to Adam Thielen. All right, Kirk Cousins is only going to throw efficiently 15 to 18 times a game. 12 of those times are going to go to Adam Thielen. That's just what they are. So I think Adam Thielen is going to be more involved as a number one in that Minnesota offense, but I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think. Listen, here is a Buffalo take right here. Allen has been dropping dimes all camp. Now, I will say this. And I will say this. I thought it was very interesting when the breakdown came out from NFL.com, the power rankings going into the season, when the Bills were ranked as the seventh most powerful team or sixth most powerful team in the NFL. That really surprised me. It did. I'll be honest with you. I like the Bills. They have a tremendous defense. I just didn't think offensively they'd be able to hold their own. But if Josh Allen is looking like the guy we think he can be with the addition of Stephon Diggs, and then you have John Brown called 72 for 1,000 last year, he can actually, he can add to that this year because he's going to be left alone more, and you still have Cole Beasley out there in the slot. So there's a lot of interesting scenarios when it comes to the Buffalo Bills offense. So I'm glad Bills Mafia checked in and started talking that, because Thielen or Diggs is definitely a good question for a lot of people going forward. Now, another receiving core is in Seattle. So another either or is where we're talking about Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf. Now, both of these guys excelled last year, 100%. And, you have Chris Carson, who for some reason, back-to-back 1,309 seasons, still gets no love. Don't know why. Have no idea. He's always drafted after the top 8, top 9 running backs, even though he puts the stats up. So we're going to get into that another day. But right now, we're just to focus on Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf, to me, listen, I wanted him on any team that I was a fan of. I think he's a freak of nature. I think just because he had some back pedals when it comes to the NFL Combine and maybe, out of college or some question marks. This kid's the real deal, man. And I was rolling Tyler Lockett. I have to admit, I never imagined Tyler Lockett being able to be the player that he is right now. I did not think he was. I thought he was just going to be like a novelty player, a guy that, couldn't be the number one. I mean, listen, for all intents and purposes, like a Deshaun Jackson, like a Ted Ginn Jr., a guy who's a speed guy, but not a number one guy when we talk about fantasy. But he has proved me wrong. He really has. Tyler Lockett, for one, has really excelled in this Seattle offense. Now, make no mistake about it, Doug Baldwin obviously is not there anymore, right? So without Doug Baldwin there, that has helped the progression of Tyler Lockett, because now who else would have thrown the ball until DK Metcalf, became one of those targets. But, DK Metcalf last year, if you look at what he did, he had 100 targets right on the button, right? Right on the button, 100 targets, 58 catches, 900 yards, and 7 touchdowns. But he averaged almost 16 yards per catch. That is where DK Metcalf excels. We did not think that DK Metcalf was going to be one of those guys that was going to be a down-the-field threat. And he turned out to be just that. So that is something that a lot of us did not think would happen. Now, on the flip side, who will be the guy who gets more points this year? And that's going to be the interesting part. 110 targets to Tyler Lockett. So that's 210 targets between the two of them. But Tyler Lockett really made up 82 catches, 1,100 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Tremendous year for Tyler Lockett. Okay, tremendous year. And I think it's even going to be better because Russell Wilson actually went in to Pete Carroll and said, listen, I know we like to run the rock with Chris Carson, but I want to throw the ball even more. I want to open this offense up. So I think that being as it may, I think that only benefits both of these guys. But if I had to pick one to have the better fantasy year, listen, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that guy is Tyler Lockett, because I think he is that special. He's that good. Which Brown would you rather draft, AJ or Marquise? So that's a very interesting question. It is a very interesting, because I loved what AJ Brown did last year. Okay, absolutely love what AJ Brown. AJ Brown came out of nowhere, right? He was a guy who, listen, he wasn't projected to be the number one guy. I mean, we remember Corey Davis was always supposed to be the guy who we expected big things from, and that's a team that started out with Marcus Mariota. So A.J. Brown excelled under Ryan Tannehill. 52 catches for 1,100 yards, basically 1051. He averages 20 yards per catch. That's where, see, this is where you have to look at it. 20 yards per catch. That is tremendous. It really is. He had weeks of 33, 31, 20, 33, 30, 34, 31. I mean, these are huge receiving average numbers, right? Huge week in and week out per catch. I mean, that is something you don't see. And he's only going to get better. I think that 52 catch mark, I think that turns into something like 70 or 75. I really do. I think that's where he's going to excel. Now, Marquise Brown is a different guy, right? He played only 14 games last year, missed a couple games. He was a speed guy, 46 catches, 600 yards, right? He had 71 targets, but for all intents and purposes, he's the guy for Lamar Jackson. He is the number one guy. And when you look at it and you look at the offense, the way it's constructed out there in Baltimore, you're talking about Mark Ingram, J.K. Dobbins, and Mark Andrews, right? They are the three guys that are going to be the centerfold of that offense. But with all the reports coming out for Hollywood Brown gaining 15 pounds of muscle, he has been basically, he's been working hard to be this number one guy. It's what he wants. Listen, you don't get the name Hollywood Brown without wanting to be in the spotlight, without wanting to be the guy, right? You just don't get that name in order to, without the territory coming with it. So I think that for me, I think this all depends on Ryan Tannehill. I think if Ryan Tannehill can excel once again and at least come close to playing as well as he did last year, I really think A.J. Brown will have the better year. But listen, Hollywood Brown, Marquise Hollywood Brown, I'll tell you what, man. He's going to put up some decent numbers this year. He's going to be an insane. He's my number two behind Ty. Listen, he's going to be insane. Are we talking about Hollywood Brown or A.J. Brown? Because I think Hollywood Brown, here's the only thing I think about Hollywood Brown, which I'll tell you to be careful with. Hollywood Brown, I don't think will be consistent fantasy score week in and week out. Now, there you go. Okay, AJ. Yes, AJ Brown will be the more consistent guy. He will be the guy that gets the consistent, 7 to 10 targets a game, and he will put up the consistent numbers where I think, Hollywood Marquise Brown's going to be more of the boomer bust guy. I think we can all agree on that. And then when you talk about, here's the big question. And I like this question because for me, can't guard Michael Thomas is Michael Thomas is, for my money, the best fantasy football receiver. Okay. But DeAndre Hopkins is the best NFL receiver. See how I did that? Two different scenarios here. So Michael Thomas is just, nothing changes for the New Orleans Saints this year. It doesn't. Nothing changes. It's the same offense. They bring in Emmanuel Sanders, which probably will only help Michael Thomas, because Michael Thomas was able to do everything he did last year on his own, right? On his own. I mean, the numbers he put up last year were something of an aberration, you would think, right? I mean, listen, he did something. He had 185 targets last year. I don't even know if that's possible, right? Put up 149 catches, basically 150, just rounded off, 1,725 yards. Now, he had the lowest average of his career, 11.6, but I think that was because he was just so involved. As the targets went up, listen, that was the only guy Drew Brees wanted to throw to. I mean, you have Emmanuel Sanders now. You have Traquan Smith, who's going to be in his second year. Maybe he steps up. But listen, nothing has changed in New Orleans, and Michael Thomas will continue to be that guy. DeAndre Hopkins, a different scenario. DeAndre Hopkins got paid, which he very well should have been, because he is that good. He is that caliber of receiver. But what I will say about DeAndre Hopkins is he's playing in a different system. He has to learn a whole new cadence. Now, was he able to form that cohesion with Kyler Murray in the short months and when they were allowed to practice? Listen, DeAndre Hopkins is so good, he can make up for it. I just don't think he's going to get the amount of targets that he got when he was in Houston, because you still have guys like Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald. You still have, not David Johnson, I'm sorry. You still have Kenyon Drake and you have Chase Edmonds in the backfield. You have a lot of mouths to feed when it comes to throwing a rock. So I think he takes a step back a little bit. I definitely do think Michael Thomas is the best. Bills Mafia, I need Michael Thomas to explode in fantasy. Listen, he will explode. He will. Michael Thomas will be everything plus more. I'll tell you right now. I'll tell you this. I've even flirted with in some leagues taking him over Christian McCaffrey. I haven't thought about taking him as my number one overall player. And, people thought I was crazy, but listen, when you talk about a guy, he was only he was 81 points behind Christian McCaffrey last year in overall fantasy points. But I just think this year is a year where Christian McCaffrey will undoubtedly be the number one player overall at the running back position. I do think he will take a step back just a little bit. And if it's 80 yards and Michael Thomas gets a couple more catches, he deserves that top spot, in my opinion. So it all depends on what league you're in. If you're in a PPR, if you're a full point PPR, half point PPR, it all depends on what we're talking about. So you also, listen, that's one thing you always had. The third of projections out the window. I can give you my projection. You can give me your own projection. Projections mean absolutely nothing to me. They really don't. I don't think they mean anything, because when we're talking about projections, they're anybody's guess. That's all they are, especially this year, right? Especially this year when you're in a year where anything is possible, right? You're in a year where anything is possible. So I take that for what it's worth. I really do. But I thought the interesting thing with Kareem Hunt signing the 2-year extension today, for all the Nick Chubb lovers out there, I think was something that really you need to keep your eyes on. You really do, because I think Kareem Hunt is the more all-around running back out there. And you see what he did his rookie year in Kansas City with the 1,300 yards and 8 to 9 touchdowns. So you see what Kareem Hunt can do. And I think that what's going to happen is, I think that, in Cleveland with Kevin Stefanski, he's going to understand who that top back is. And listen, Nick Chubb is very talented, but from a fantasy perspective, let's not forget that he did disappear in at least 8 or 9 games last year, right? He definitely disappeared between 8 or 9 games last year. So I think that's where Kareem Hunt comes into play. I do. So to check, who should I start week 1? Josh Allen or Breeze matchup? Strength goes to Allen. Week 1 is very interesting. This is what I will say. No matter what the matchup is, Josh Allen is a guy that we're hoping for production from, right? Josh Allen is a guy that we're hoping takes that next step. Drew Brees has always been there. We already know what Drew Brees is capable of. We already knew what Drew Brees is all about. So when I talk about week 1, no matter what, I am starting 100% my veteran studs. I am starting the guys that I know that are going to produce. I am not doing any risks. I understand that fantasy is risk versus reward. But in week 1, I need to get a win. I need to get off the snide, so to speak. I need to get the momentum going right from the onset. So the way you do that is you put in your top guys. Now, the matchup may be intriguing. Obviously, I understand that. But I still think that there's nothing in me that says I would start Josh Allen over a guy like Drew Brees. I just think that caliber of player, to me is ridiculous that to even talk about that. Now, you can look at some publications that have Josh Allen rated higher than Drew Brees, right? I completely understand that, but a lot of that is based on rushing yards. Right, a lot of that is based on how much Josh Allen is going to rush. I mean, the highest projection I've seen for Josh Allen is like 3,600 passing yards. Drew Brees we're talking a consistent 42 to 4,500 yards. You just don't pack that in week 1. Now, if Josh Allen decides he looks like he's a gamer in the first 2 weeks of the season, well, then absolutely, by all means, you start Josh Allen. But for me, I would definitely start Drew Brees, without a doubt. Now, when you look at Buffalo, the interesting thing about Buffalo is who is going to be the running back out there. And I'm not trying to get this into a big Buffalo show here, but you have to look at who's going to be running a rock out there on a consistent basis. Now, I know Devin Singletary, that's everybody's favorite pick, but Zach Moss isn't that far behind him. I mean, at any time, Zach Moss could enter the fold and take over the job, and it could become a 50-50 split. Leonard Fournette was it was my favorite pick for him to go to Buffalo. I just thought that was a great scenario for him. Obviously, he's in better weather, he's in a better climate, and a better system now in Tampa Bay. But I thought Buffalo was a system that could fit him when we talk about, pound for pound running the rock. So that'll be the interesting thing of what happens in Buffalo. It's more of who's going to be running the rock, not who's going to be catching the rock. Now, the other interesting thing is to see the evolution of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. For anybody who has watched Andy Reid over the years and anybody who is a Philadelphia fan or a Kansas City fan, you know what Andy Reid does with rookie running backs. Now, he changed his stripes a little bit when we talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, because when he was in Philadelphia, he allowed LaShawn McCoy and Brian Westbrook to kind of take a back seat in his first year, and then he let them go in his second year. Now, with Kareem Hunt, he decided to just let the boy explode, and that's exactly what he did. So right now with the opt-out of Damian Williams, it's a really interesting scenario for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because he is going to a highly prolific offense out there in Kansas City, probably the number one offense in all of the NFL. So remember, for years, a guy named Marshall Faulk was played on The Greatest Show on Turf, and Marshall Faulk obviously was second to none, but a lot of his offensive production came from the consistency of a Mike Martz run offense. So if you're talking about a Kansas City run offense by gaining Patrick Mahomes, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he could be a remarkable pick this year. He really could. I don't know if I'm ready to take him as high as he's going. I mean, listen, if you look at the running back board, and for my money, I would say this again, obviously the Christian McCaffrey's number one. I still have Dalvin Cook as number two. Kamar is my number three with Saquon, and then rounded off with Zeke. So, are you willing to put Clyde Edwards-Helaire into that top five? Are you willing to put him ahead of guys like Derrick Henry and Joe Mixon? Listen, I would put him ahead of Joe Mixon. I don't know if I'm putting him ahead of Derrick Henry. I don't. I think even though rookie running backs can produce, I don't know. Yeah, I take CJ after exactly. I would definitely take Clyde Edwards-Helaire after Derrick Henry. I would be taking Derrick Henry first. So that's no doubt about it to me. The interesting part comes to the Josh Jacobs situation. Now, I was lucky enough in one of my leagues, and again, I will preface this by saying I am a Dalvin Cook guy. I think Dalvin Cook is the number 2 running back in fantasy football, and I think he will show that again this year in a Gary Kubiak run offense. Now, what I will say about Clyde Edwards-Helaire is he will be given every opportunity to be able to produce 100%. So it bears watching to see how they use him right off the bat. But to get back to Josh Jacobs, I was lucky enough in one of my leagues. I had the number 8 pick in a 12-man league, and I was able to get Dalvin Cook, which really surprised me. I have no idea how I got Dalvin Cook at number 8. And then on the reverse, I was able to get Josh Jacobs. Now, I think Josh Jacobs has every bit the opportunity to be the offensive NFL MVP this year, especially when it comes to fantasy football. I cannot tell you how much I love Josh Jacobs. And a big reason why I love Josh Jacobs is because of John Gruden. John Gruden, if you watched the abbreviated NFL draft, the virtual draft, and you were in the war room for the Vegas Raiders, if you were in there and you watched the way John Gruden was pumped up when he got Henry Ruggs, the way he was so invested. It was basically like he already had the plays in his head he was going to call. Listen, John Gruden is one of my favorite coaches of all time. He's very giddy. He's a brilliant offensive mind, and he had Josh Jacobs balling last year, and he will not only take the next step, he's probably going to take the next 2 steps in order to be elite. He really is. They have a really interesting system going on out there in Oakland. Our offensive line played very well last year. That's one of the reasons why Jacobs was so good. Okay, you draft Henry Ruggs. It's going to open up that offense. I understand that you still have Derek Carr there. I get it. But Josh Jacobs, I'll tell you what, Josh Jacobs will explode. He really will. And I think he's going to be very, very, very good this year. I don't think there's any mistake about it. I really don't. So here's the thing. Bill's Mafia is asking, am I going to be okay with Wentz as a quarterback 1? Well, here's the interesting part about Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz, for any amount of money is definitely a quarterback one when it comes to NFL. Fantasy, it will be interesting. You have to look at the makeup of this team. And right now, I don't know what the offense is going to look like when we're talking about throwing the ball. There's so many injuries that have been mounting on this team, and they really, really haven't. They haven't addressed the wide receiver position. I still think I'm telling you, Greg Ward to me, I know it's a fan. Greg Ward to me will lead the team in targets when at the receiver position. Obviously, Zach Ertz will get all the targets in tight end position, but Greg Ward, I think, will lead the team in targets. That's not saying much. Listen, no disrespect to Greg Ward, but I think that's how lean the wide receiver position is for the Philadelphia Eagles. I don't think Deshaun Jackson will play a full season. He's always going to get hurt. And he's always a year older. So Carson Wentz, listen, he did a lot with nothing last year. I just think it's going to be a lot harder for him this year to get those 2 and 3 touchdown games. I think you might see a lot of number 1 touchdown games for Carson Wentz this year. I think numbers like maybe 250, 260 and 1, you may see a lot with Carson Wentz. And the reason why is just because the way the offense is going to be unfolded, because Miles Sanders is going to be the guy. Miles Sanders is 100% going to be the guy. And if you're going to have a solid running game, then you're going to take away some of the passing, because you have to cover that up, right? You have to cover that up. And one thing that I've seen the Philadelphia Eagles do a lot of is running the ball in the red zone, something they didn't do a lot in the past. They used to throw a lot, but they decided to run a lot last year. So that's something to be weary of when we're talking about Carson Wentz as your number 1 running back. Now, when you go flip it to the Dallas Cowboys, here's another either or. Are you you go with Michael Gallup or Amari Cooper? And if you're not, if you haven't read, Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup have basically averaged the same amount of fantasy points week in and week out last year. So, but the problem is one has a bigger average than the other, right? So that's when you look at the interesting part about. For me, I'll just tell you right now, it's Michael Gallup for me. I think Michael Gallup is going to have the better year. I really do. I mean, last year, he really excelled. He played 14 games last year. He's going to be a 30 receiver. You know what they say about third-year wide receivers. Takes the next step. 15.4 average in 2018, 16.8 average in 2019. Had 113 targets, 66 for 1107. 17 yards per catch, which means he is getting down the field early and often. Now, Amari Cooper is the guy they paid big money to. That's the guy they traded for. That's the guy that they wanted, right? That's the guy. Last year, 79 catches for 1,189 yards, 15.1. Now, the interesting thing with Amari Cooper is he was kind of boomer bust. There was games where he just didn't show up. I mean, if you take 6 out of, actually 7 out of his last 8, he finished under 10 fantasy points last year. That is not good. That's not good. That's not what you want. That's why I really think Michael Gallup excels in this offense. And I hate to say it because obviously I'm a Philly guy, but guess what? Dak Prescott, he has every opportunity to win the MVP and be a fantasy number 1 overall quarterback. And I'm telling you, I know everybody says it's Patrick Mahomes, but if you just, I keep talking about it, man, because I was always a Green Bay guy. I was a Brett Favre guy. I was an Aaron Rodgers guy. And you just look at Mike McCarthy's MO, and you look at what he's been able to do over the course of all his coaching years. He loves to pass the ball. He really does. And you watch, you've been like a plus 300 for the last 3 years when you talk about Dak Prescott going up in yardage throwing. Last year, a 49.02. I mean, he threw for 49.02. He was 98 yards away from 5,000. I think he could throw for every bit of 52 to 5,300 yards this year. I know it sounds crazy, but I really don't think it is. If you look at that offense with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Blake Jarwin, and then you have Zeke out of the backfield. I mean, the options are going to be endless for Dak, and Dak's even going to run the ball too. So, Dak has. he's that guy to me. I would draft Dak Prescott above Lamar Jackson this year. I really would. For me, I know a lot of people say who was after Lamar, who was after Patrick and Lamar. I think it's who was after Patrick and Dak, because I think Dak is the number 2 quarterback, and he could push Patrick Mahomes for that top spot, depending on, obviously, there's always an injury factor, and this year the COVID factor. But I think that's something to watch. I really do. It's something that bears watching, because you just never know. Now, another situation that I think is very interesting is the one that's unfolded in Chicago, because a lot of my preseason picks, guys like Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller, were based upon Nick Foles being the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears. I don't know what the hell Matt Nagy's doing out there when, in Chicago, but he's definitely on the hot seat. Ryan Pace, as the GM, is already on the hot seat, and I don't think you make it any colder by taking Mitchell Trubisky again and making him your starter. I mean, obviously, I know you're talking about confidence here, but you brought Nick Foles in here for a reason. And even though I'm not a huge Nick Foles guy, I think he still gives you more of an offer than Mitchell Trubisky. Let Mitch relax. Let Mitch learn. It's something that, he's shown so many inconsistencies over the years, and that's why the Bears offense has stuttered year in and year out. And guys like Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller could really excel under Nick Foles. So it's a shame, in my opinion, for fantasy owners that decision was made. So we'll see how it works out down the pike. But I think it's going to be very, very interesting. Now, just to talk about a couple guys who I think are going really late. And guys that I think nobody is looking at, man. One of those guys, in my own opinion, is a guy named Chris Thompson. Chris Thompson, for my money, has every opportunity to take over the top spot in Jacksonville. Chris Thompson, he's a young running back, spent his career in Washington, right? I mean, I say young, he's under 30, right? He's 29. I get it, but he can catch the ball. He averaged 60 targets a year. I mean, he definitely knows how to catch the ball, and he can run the ball as well, because when he's gotten over 60 carries or 60 attempts, he's averaged more than 4.6 yards per carry. So he can get done on the ground and through the air. So I think he automatically, I know they say it's James Robinson. I don't believe it. It's not the Divine kid. I don't believe it. I think this is going to be Chris Thompson's job. They're going to be down a lot. Jacksonville absolutely stinks. They're going to be down a ton. Guys like DJ Chark are going to excel. I think Chris Thompson is a tremendous sleeper that nobody's talking about that you can get. He's another guy that's going to be ranked very low DFS wise. You're going to be able to get him for probably under $3,000, maybe 3,500 tops when you're talking about filling out your streamlined lineup. Another guy is Jerick McKinnon. I keep talking about the Jerick McKinnon train. Jerick McKinnon is another guy nobody's talking about in San Francisco. He was brought in here given big money. Why? Because Shanahan loves to throw the ball to the running back. He loves running backs that have the ability to catch the ball. That's why he had Devonta Freeman. He brought in Tevin Coleman to be Tevin Coleman, not Devonta Freeman. Devonta Freeman is Jerick McKinnon. Jerick McKinnon is his Devonta Freeman. So that's why I'm excited over McKinnon, because he's been out of the league for 2 years because of injury. He's looked very good in camp, in an abbreviated camp. He's the one guy that can catch the ball. It's not Raheem Mostert. It's not Tevin Coleman. It is Jerick McKinnon. Obviously, he'll start out as a third down back, but I think if he shows the flashes, he shows the ability, they are going to lock in to Jerick McKinnon. I'm going to tell you that right now. What's up, Mike? Checking in as always, Mikey V. I appreciate the love, my man. Jerick McKinnon is a guy who I just think that will be locked and loaded and ready to excel in that Shanahan system, especially when they don't want Jimmy G throwing the ball more than 15 to 16 times a game. So that three-headed monster out there, I think that's the guy. I'm going to keep saying I think Jerick McKinnon's the guy when we talk about the running back starter for that team, and he's going to be another guy that's very low on the chart that nobody is really talking about. Then you look at Antonio Gibson, right, from Washington. Here's another guy's going below the radar, right? He's going under the radar. Listen, Washington is going to stink. They are. And I still think it was a handshake agreement for them to release, Adrian Peterson, because I think they knew they were in a rebuilding year, and we don't know what the condition is. God bless for my boy Ron Rivera out there battling cancer. He started his chemo treatments today. So, God willing, he will be back on the sideline as soon as possible and be able to coach the team as much as he can, even if he does it through treatment. So we'll see how much energy he has. But, Antonio Gibson's a rookie they really liked, took in the third round, and he's going to have every opportunity to take that spot. He really is, and for a team that's going to have to score points because, sorry, I'm late. That game was wild. No problem, Mike. I went a little early because I don't think I was going to make it up any later. But listen, I like Antonio Gibson later. I think he's another guy. We mentioned Chris Carson. He's not much of a sleeper, but he's a guy that nobody's really looking at. He's another guy that you can get after those top guys, and I think people are sleeping on him. I do. David Johnson's another guy. I think not enough people are giving him enough love because they understand that he's going to be, if he's going to be healthy, he'll be good. But what they also understand is that he hasn't been able to be healthy in the last couple of years. So one guy is interesting is Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor in most of my leagues is getting drafted before Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack he had under 20 catches last year. He's not a pass catching back. Jonathan Taylor, they drafted to be the guy. Obviously, they have Daniel Himes out there, who is the third down back, who is the receiving back. But I think Jonathan Taylor is really going to push Marlon Mack for some time, and I think it's going to be more of a split than people think. That's the hard thing about fantasy football, man. At the running back position, the splits are going to be plentiful. They really are, and they're really going to piss you off. Especially, I tell the story all the time. I remember when I drafted Lawrence Maroney really early in a fantasy draft for the New England Patriots, and I remember seeing him in the first 2 years. He wasn't even in the game. The old, good old Bill Belichick. Instead it's like Brandon Bowden out there or something. So or Kevin Folke throws out there instead of Lawrence Maroney. You just never know what's going to happen. You don't. You just listen. It's risk and reward, right? It's all. That's what it's all. It's a game of you roll the dice and hopefully the dice come out and hopefully your team excels and scores enough points on 1 week to week. But again, I'm going to keep doing these live every week because every night, honestly, gearing up tomorrow night. We are going to go live to Heat Ratio. We're going to have the live podcast tomorrow night. We're talking all things Philly sports and some national topics, and we're going to cover play-by-play for the game. We'll talk about scenarios as they're live of the Houston-Kansas City game. I can't wait. I think we're all itching to have the NFL back. It's something we all love. It's something we all miss. And I'll tell you what, they couldn't have picked a better game than to have the Chiefs and the Texans, and you watch Deshaun Watson go toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes. Sleeper pick for me from a fantasy perspective. I said today on a daily ticket with John Jansen, I will say it again tonight, is McCole Hardman. I think McCole Hardman is the guy that really puts up the lion's share of the points when we talk about that game. I have no faith in the secondary for the Houston Texans. I really don't. We don't know what we're going to get from a push from up front. So I think that Patrick Mahomes is going to have a field day throwing the ball. And I honestly think that Deshaun Watson is going to be able to throw as long as he gets some time against a questionable secondary for the Kansas City Chiefs. So again, it'll be interesting to see what happens for sure. But again, thanks for everybody for tuning in, man. 45 minutes. I only plan to go 30, but I get so many comments. Bill's Mafia was the commenter of the night. Thanks for checking in, as always, giving me the insight to Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. That's why we do these things. Again, follow me at Tikatillo23. Follow me at Heat Ratio Sports. The Heat Ratio, we're up to 150 episodes combined. The Fantasy Firebox, which we do week in and week out. Listen, I'm going to have some really good guests on. I already had some great guests on. Going to have some more on coming up. You'll be able to stream that as well on Fox PHL Gambler, at Fox PHL Gambler. And again, at PhillyInfluence.com, always showing up some good stuff there. But again, I appreciate the support. So everybody playing fantasy football this year, good luck. Remember, it starts tomorrow night. I'm very interested to see what we think. And again, for all you fantasy players out there, don't forget, go to Thrive Fantasy. I got your promo code. Use the word HEAT. You deposit $20. You get $20 free. 20 for 20, man. You deposit 20, you get 20. You get the bet $40 for 20. And you never know, man. You might be able to win yourself some money. The code is HEAT. So everybody stay safe, stay healthy, and we will catch you next time.